During the Xbox showcase this year, I saw a small glimpse of As Dusk Falls, and you could just say that I was incredibly intrigued by the premise. This style of game isn't by any means new. You have all of the Telltale games, the Dark Pictures anthology, which if you haven't played already, you really need to. The trilogy is just incredible. And then you've got other stuff like Detroit, Becoming Human, and Heavy Rain. It's basically just an interactive graphic novel, which I'll admit isn't for everyone, but I honestly think that if you haven't tried this genre before, you should definitely give it a go. Now, the thing that caught my attention more than anything was the art style. It looked really interesting, so I just thought I would give it a go myself, and it's exactly what I've done. The game was made with less of an animated style and more so like a slideshow, but then when you get into the game, it becomes harder and harder for you to be able to tell that's what it actually is. I had multiple people coming into chat and tell me that the game was running on like 3 FPS, when in reality after playing it I could barely even tell. The story does such a great job at captivating the audience that it almost feels as if it is animated. The easiest way to describe it is just kind of think about D&D. You have the base image of what's going on and the rest is just kind of processed in your head. So far I've played through this game twice, and I'm likely to play through it a few more times as well. The biggest thing about this game is it honestly can barely be considered a game, not because of length, entertainment value or controls, but it is essentially a massive interactive movie with a couple of Quicktime events involved. This, however, isn't really a bad thing. One of the biggest things that I found annoying about the Dark Picture anthology was that some of the controls for the game were incredibly clunky. And because the game was massively focused on storytelling, some of the gameplay mechanics weren't quite up to scratch, and I think that's where As Dusk Falls has really pulled itself ahead. Now, this is where As Dusk Falls really hits home, because the graphics aren't incredible. Because of the art style that they've chosen, and because of the limited gameplay elements, it's really straightforward and it's really easy to play. And although this may sound like a bit of a downfall, it's actually one of the biggest positives for this game, as it really does make the story the actual vocal part of the game, and I can honestly say that it's brilliant. I played the game through both times over on my Twitch, link in the description of the video below. First time I played it, I made all the decisions myself. Like most people, I wanted to experience the game on my own, but also we love talking about these things, so Twitch just kind of made the most sense. During the second one, I used the new mechanics that was introduced in this game. It allows you to link your Twitch chat to the game and enable broadcast mode. This basically allows your chat to make the decisions by using a hashtag and putting the number of the option they want in chat. I've never seen this before in a standard game, and it was so nice and refreshing to see. This is a great mechanic, and it allows other people to get involved, and I really like that. The game also gives you multiplayer options, which seems incredibly weird considering the type of game that this is, but basically it just allows you to pass the control around and let everyone take turns in making a decision. They also have an app. That's weird, right? There's a few games out there that have apps, but usually they're just companion apps that don't really do much. The only ones that I've ever really used was the one for Fallout 4, where you just move stuff around in your Pip-Boy, and then one for the original Dying Light game, which I'll say I still don't really understand. The app basically just works as a controller. This is so you can have the game in like a communal space, such as a living room, and then you can have everyone on the app on their own devices so they can make moves on what they want to do. It kind of works in a similar way to broadcast mode. Although it does seem a little bit weird, the concept of it is actually incredible. Now, on both playthroughs I've had completely different experiences. The first was quite happy considering everything that actually happens throughout the story, whereas the second story was absolutely horrendous. Some of the things that happened made it seem like I almost didn't really want to carry on playing because it was so bad. But one of the main things that I noticed was that it was very similar to some sort of long-running TV shows. And if you don't understand what I mean by that, let me just explain it. You find yourself becoming incredibly attached to characters. The two that really stood out to me were Vince, who's the character that you mostly are in control of during the first book of the game, and then Jay, the kid who's in it from the start, but he takes a much more prominent role in the second book. So the thing with the characters really is just that every single one of them is very well written. There isn't a single person in the story that I saw and thought, well, you don't really belong here, because everyone has their own reasons to be in Turok. The motel part of the game is incredibly well paced, with so many twists and turns depending on what you do and what you say. then the second half of the game is also just incredible. Seeing all of the paths you can possibly take really does make it feel like you're fully in control of the game. Now, there are a few decisions that you make in the game that are considered more important than the other ones. These are usually indicated with a big yellow box on the top that says you're at a crossroad, which is kind of good because sometimes it does feel like the smaller decisions aren't as important because of those, but I can promise you that that isn't the case. Now, the game technically spans over 30 years, and you can really see a ton of character development throughout these years. Some good, some terrible, but it really does again just depend on the choices that you make along the way. Some things that you do seem incredibly insignificant, and then it comes to the next chapter and all of a sudden, you deciding that you were going to eat that chocolate bar has nearly killed somebody. It's ridiculous how much stuff really does matter in this game. They do have some sections which are just the same as Thanos. They're inevitable. But it doesn't ever really feel like you're being railroaded. They always lead in completely different ways, and it tends to be that they always make sense, which is incredible how they've made each scenario add up to that. One of the best aspects of this game though, where it really does come alive, is the soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack in this game is just brilliant. There isn't a bad word that I can actually say about it. I mean, the song in the opening menu of the game has been stuck in my head for weeks. But generally throughout the game, their use of songs and music in places, it just seems to be almost perfect, and it's so satisfying when you can feel a scene intensifying just because of the music. It 100% adds more emotion to each part of the game, and I think it's a very prevalent part of their storytelling. Now, there is one part of the game that really confused me. When I first played the game, I thought that it was incredibly short, but it turns out that I didn't realise the game was set in two halves, and it was a first book and a second book, and when I completed the first book, I just kind of assumed that the ending was just bad. That was the end of the game. And when you get there, you'll see exactly what I mean. It very much feels like a really bad ending. Turns out I was wrong, and it was just a pause, but it's worth noting that that caught me off guard. Obviously, a game can't just be all good. So one of the things that I would say that really needs to improve is the Quicktime Events. So I haven't played the game on console, but on PC it literally is just the mouse getting moved a little bit. Sometimes you may have to press a button, but it's all mouse based. My assumption is just that they do it this way to make it slightly less pressurized so you can take in more of the story that's being told. But even then I feel like it lacks a lot of aspects from traditional games. Although I can't really work out if that's a good thing or if that's a bad thing. Either way, this is one of the only games from this year that I would recommend to everyone. Gamers, non-gamers, and people who just want to try something that's a little bit new. If it had less potential depth in it, I would say I'd recommend it to people of all ages, but some of the subject matter is a little bit too raw. One of the biggest things that I appreciated about this game was on the chapter that contained some content that was a little bit too deep and contained some very rough topics. They do give you the option to play it out, or they just say, we can give you the best possible ending and you can avoid this. I thought this was a really sweet thing to do from the devs due to just all of the trigger warnings. But that's all I really have to say on it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If I've missed anything, feel free to let me know down below in the comments. Remember to like the video if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and hopefully I'll see you next time.